Welcome to this edition of The Lineup. My name is Bennett Oliver, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Douglasville. Today on The Lineup we have a special guest, Dot Pageant, who's going to talk about the history of the Park and Recreation Department for the City of Douglasville. Stay tuned for The Lineup. Welcome back. As we talk about opening up the new Hunter Park Community Center in late November, we thought it would be a good chance, instead of going forward, to take a step way back to talk about the City of Douglasville's Park and Recreation Department. We have asked Dot Pageant, our local historian, to come in and give us some interviews. Dot, welcome.
Thank you, Bennett. I'll answer any questions.
First of all, why does, when the history of the City of Douglasville come up, your name always pop up?
Oh, I don't know. I tell everybody, I guess it's because I'm as old as dirt, been around here that long. But I do some research, and I think that's what's important. I try to find out what's happened in the past and have been so pleased with going through the archives, right. Some of the information I've come up with.
Right. Well, today we're going to start in 1944.
Yeah.
That's kind of the first article that we found. And what was going on at this time, there was a bond that they were trying to get for $15,000 for the Parks and Recreation Department. So kind of tell us a little bit about what went on.
Well, in 1944, Dr. Turk was on the city council. And I think it's so unique that the city would do that, because this, of course, was wartime, 1944. And the editors of the paper, P.D. Matthews and Marie Matthews, were the ones who really pushed for this. And so they did what they thought would be the best thing. They got 300 young people to march in a parade. And this was in support of the $15,000 bond issue. The bond issue had to pass with the majority of the registered voters. They needed 192 voters. They only got 88 in favor of it, 4 votes that they didn't have enough. They liked the 4 votes and to get the bond passed, but that actually did not stop the work of the Parks Department in 1944. They went ahead and picked out a site, but it was not Hunter Park.
Right.
But this was the forerunner, and I think it was sort of indicative of the city of Douglasville and how progressive they have always been.
So there was 392 registered voters in 1944.
Correct.
And they came up 4 votes short of passing this bond referendum. But they did go out and they did purchase some property, which now the Armory sets on, Fire Station number 10.
It's behind that, yes.
Where Airway Christian Academy
Correct.
is.
Yeah.
So they did have an effort. They put forth an effort to try to do something for the Parks and Recreation
They even
Department.
appropriated $2,000 to decorate it. Right. So I think that speaks well for our city council and the city leaders then.
Right. Well, we jump ahead to 1956, and here we have an ordinance putting together the first recreation committee. And what I noticed was it actually went back to this 1946 in this ordinance, and some of the people that were on the committee appointments were Floyd Morgan, R.S. Alexander, John Pope, Ike Owens, and Mr. Atchison.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, out of that group, you will find, and you will come to it and mention him many times, as Ike Owens. So I'm sure I'll let it stay there, and of course we still have members of his family here in Douglas County. Right.
And of course the Ike Owens building, which was formerly at the Hunter Park, was named after him. So sometime between 1944 and 1956, they decided that they were going to not put the park uptown, but somebody donated some land out where Hunter Park is now.
Let's see now. Perhaps there was a donation, perhaps it was something very low cost, but it was a pasture.
Just a pasture land.
Correct, yeah. And they built Pinecrest Street
right.
off of Rose Avenue. And when they built that going into the park, then that opened up a beautiful residential area.
Right.
So having the park out there has other advantages for the city.
Yeah. So Gurley Road actually wasn't there. You came in Pinecrest.
Correct.
And as people started building houses, there was a lot more traffic in that residential area, and so then they decided to go build the entrance on Gurley Road.
I think that was the reason for it, yeah. Probably.
Okay. Well, we move forward to 1957, and up until this point, I'm envisioning you had a shelter out at the city park, which it was called, which the Chamber of Commerce built.
Chamber of Commerce built the first shelter after that. It was just a small shelter on the lake. I guess the lake was probably part of the property when it was bought.
Right.
And the Chamber of Commerce built the little shelter. That's all we had for a long time.
Yep. Well, in 1957, somebody came up with the idea that they wanted to build a swimming pool at Hunter Park. And we talked a little bit before. This wasn't the first swimming pool in the city of Douglasville. You had talked about one on Campbellton Street. And went by there. You had told me that there's actually a house on top of the swimming pool. They actually kept the pool for their basement. And I went by there yesterday, and it is on Campbellton Street, about three houses down from Georgia Power there. But the city wanted to build their own swimming pool. So of course,
that one was 1917, and it closed.
Right. Yeah. But they decided they wanted to build their own, and so they had a town meeting. I guess that's the way things were done, and they're still done today.
Yes.
To raise the money for the swimming pool at Hunter Park. Now, they looked at several different designs, and we actually have the outline for the swimming pool. This is from March 11th, 1957, and the Plan A was for a $55,000 swimming pool, and bathhouse included, and then Plan B was a little smaller pool for $45,000.
And they went with the larger one, I understand, which I think is great. I think there again it says something for the leaders in the city of Douglasville. And if you don't go back to Ike Owens, I really do want to, though, because Ike ran a store here.
Western Auto.
He actually left his business in the hands of his wife and his partners and stayed at the park. And when they were building the park and the centers and so forth, he stayed out there all the time. So we owe a lot to Ike Owens.
Absolutely. And one thing that was interesting when we were talking yesterday, they did pass the ordinance to build the pool out at Hunter Park. It was built, and we've also got a couple of things here.
It's interesting.
Yeah, they wanted a work day at City Park. It's still called City Park, of course, but there's an urgent need for cleanup day at City Park. I will be glad to donate either a half day's work, a day's work, or $5 for someone in my place.
I find that fascinating. And in these, years ago, everybody knew everybody's signature.
Right.
If you saw something with a check, you knew it was that man's signature. And this is the way we used to do things in Douglasville. We'd go down the front street, go down to other streets, and we'd get people to sign up, and they'd have to put their signature on something. Yeah. People don't do that anymore. They do it email or something, but this was part of the way that we used to do things in Douglasville. Get somebody to sign up.
Yeah, even in 1958.
But it was just tremendous what people would do.
Yeah, community involvement was really important.
Absolutely.
And we certainly think it is today. So,
yeah. It's done differently today, but it's practically, we still have a lot of community spirit.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about $55,000 for a swimming pool in 1958, that sounds like an awful lot of money. Now, today, this facility would cost about $1.5 million.
Is that right?
Yeah, but when you look back and compare things, it's really, it was a lot of money back then. It was a big vote that they had to go through to get this built.
Well, what you have to understand too, Bennett, is there were no private pools. No, there were no homes like every home now has a private pool.
Or subdivisions.
Correct. And there were no private pools, and so everybody had 3 or 4 children. Right. And I always felt like a monkey in a cage because I always had the little ones in the wading pool and the larger ones in the other pool, and I felt like I was standing in the wire, looking out, watching. But it was all families, and there was a tremendous amount of interest in it because of that. Because there were a lot of children, and they needed those facilities.
Yeah. Well, the pool was built in 1959, I think, and of course the 4th of July parade, which it still comes into Hunter Park when it concludes. It was coming into Hunter Park at that time, and I read an article yesterday where the proceeds from the 4th of July parade went toward the new community house, and so they were talking about, they've got a pool now, and they were talking about building a community house, which they did.
Well, I watched it grow very slowly, but there was always something happening, I thought.
Yeah. And then, according to you, just the basement of the building was built, which of course we know is the Ike Owens building. And then the second story came, and it had a dance floor on it. And then eventually the office complex and the kitchen facility was built on the front. So that building stood from the early 60s all the way until this April. So,
you know, one of the things that we didn't talk about earlier was the family reunions that were held out there. And during the summer, I don't think that there was ever a weekend that there was not a large gathering for family reunions.
Right.
So, you know, it's just important to everybody.
Yeah, and still today, I mean, we do a lot of family reunions over at Jesse Davis Park and all of our parks.
Yeah.
Before we get away from the pool, you told me an interesting story yesterday. You were, of course, I don't know what the health regulations were back in 1958, but I'm sure they're not as much as they are now. But you were telling about this trough, I guess you called it.
Yeah, trough.
All right, what went on there?
Oh, well, my husband had a wicked sense of humor, and he loved young people. And one night we were there, and this little trough, a pan of water, was situated between the boys' dressing room and the girls' dressing room and the outside. And so there was no way you could get into the pool without stepping through that water that had disinfectant in it. And of course you had to clean your feet off. You went through it, it was for your feet. And well, this young lady decided that she was going to bypass that. So very gingerly, she stepped on this side and she stepped on that side. And by the time she made the second step, she made a big splash and sat down in the pool of water. And Dave looked over at her and he says, "Honey," said, "that pan of water's made for your feet." And she'd been, so rear end was in it by then. And so if she's listening to this, Paula, you'll remember who it was, and she'll get a big laugh out of it, because for years she told that story. You know what Mr. Paget told me? But that was just a way that they did things then, and that was to, you know, to keep your dirty feet from going into it seems a little primitive,
right? Well,
but we always thought it was a good story because it was just fun.
Yeah, and also you told me yesterday that a swimsuit was required. They had a sign
no, that
up.
was the 1917 pool.
Oh, the 1917 pool.
Yeah.
And what kind of jumped out at me is it's not that you had to have on a bathing suit, but you were saying most people wore overalls in that time.
Well, that would have been 1917.
Right.
By the time we got to 1958, 59, people were really more into, you know, everybody, especially the girls.
Right.
They wanted to be sure that they looked good in their swimsuits.
Yeah. And you told me a 4th of July parade, we used to have a beauty contest, and you were telling me that they were proud of this swimming pool, so they set up metal chairs all the way around it, and that's where they had the beauty contest, and it didn't work out quite as planned.
Oh my goodness, those little girls! They had it was the junior contest, and the little 8 and 9-year-old girls, and they paraded them out there. And those metal chairs had been sitting there since 8 o'clock in the morning, so they were I think you could have probably fried an egg on them by then. And so they paraded the little girls out, stood them in front of each chair and says, "Now be seated." They sat down, most of them hopped up as quick as they could. Then they eased up. It was not one of the best parts of their lives, and some of them still remember it and still remind me of how I scorched their little bottoms.
Well, of course, we move forward a little bit. We have a basement building now, and we have a swimming pool. And then Mr. Young, which was very involved in all aspects of the recreation department, he was a train advocate, and he donated a train to the park.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a big day when they had the little train, and it was run by coal, and so it had everything that you wanted. The romance of trains, and that's the steam and the smoke coming out and the little... Can you do the whistle of one of those little... I'm not sure I can do it.
No.
Woo, woo.
And you actually drove the train one day, I understand, which didn't turn out to be so good.
No, in my frivolity. I was doing the train and I got a bad speck in my eye and had to go have it removed. But the train was popular. It was really a large part of the, and there again, you know, it didn't cost a lot of money, and it was not a lot of the hoop-de-loo that we have these days, and I'm not sure that the children would want to ride it, but it was fun.
Right.
And parents would ride it, or either they put the children on it by themselves and wave and It was a good part of the park back then too.
And the original train that Mr. Young donated was a steam engine, which those were later outlawed because of asbestos, and so
And specs.
Yep. And so we actually acquired a new train for the city, and it was called the Southerner. And this train, I got a picture of it here. This train's being renovated back to its original condition, and it's been over in Alabama for a couple of years. But when the new Hunter Park opens up, the train track will be refurbished, and the train will be reconditioned back to its original equipment. So it's going to be certainly something.
Well, this one holds a lot more passengers, I think, than it
holds about 75.
75.
I think the little one, the old one was a smaller train.
Yes.
Of course, it was a steam engine, and this one's not, but I think it held 60 at that time.
Yeah.
And so when they decided to build the train track, I've got a little article here. It said, since the list was started about 2 weeks ago, the train track has been laid down and the train has run some.
Run some. And sometimes it didn't run.
And approximately 1,150 cross ties were used, 150 tons of crushed rock, and $1,100 of labor, making the total cost of putting the train at $1,700. And it says all of this is not paid for, and the money must be raised some way. So they didn't really have a plan at that point, but they went ahead and did it anyway. So they asked for donations, and we even have another one of these work days that they're talking about, and they signed up, but looks like the price has gone up to $25 for a work day.
Times are getting better.
Yep, instead of the $5 that we saw in 1958.
What's one of the names on there? Read one of the names.
Let's see. We've got Builder Supply. I guess that's a company.
Yeah.
We've got Mr. Baggett.
Well, we still have Mr. Baggett, or some of the Baggets around, still doing a lot of community service.
Yep, and I see Thornton Chevrolet. I guess that would be Bill Thornton.
Bill, and of course John, and both of them make their contributions.
Yep, John still supports our youth football program, so he's been a supporter, and many of these people have been a supporter. E.C. Dodson.
Well, that would be Joel Dodson, and then we've got Dodd King, who's a part of that family.
Right. We've got a couple of Taylors here. So several people. Western Auto is on there, so I guess we know that's Ike Owens, the Commercial Bank of Douglasville. So everybody supported the park back then.
It was that type of, as I've said before, community spirit that made things work for us, no matter what it was. You could have an ugly man contest, and you could get people.
And y'all did have one, right?
Right, we had an ugly man contest.
And you can tell who won that one. Who won that contest?
Well, it was Hunter Park, named after Robert Hunter, and his dad was Buzz Hunter, a very popular man here, and he fought to win the ugly man contest.
Yeah.
But he also told a friend of his, says, I hope you don't ever die because I don't want to be the ugliest man in Douglas County.
and this park was called City Park all the way up until the mid-'60s when the park was renamed for, you mentioned, Robert Hunter, which was the first casualty of the Vietnam War here in Douglas County. Yeah. And so even then his dad was involved before them. Right. So now it's Hunter Park. We've got a picture here of a J.C. float at one of the 4th of July parades.
Oh, yeah. Those beauties on there,
yep,
they're still around.
Joyce Lumpkin and Linda Redding.
Right.
And looks like Jimmy Lou DeFore. So you still know those ladies?
Oh, they're still around. They still look good.
And I have to say, they actually did a good job with the floats. I don't think we do that good of a job now in our 4th of July parade. So.
Yeah, they're still around.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. We've talked about them building the what they called the community house. It was the one-story building, then it evolved to 3 stories. But a couple of things that they had in there, they had a senior group that met every Wednesday, and we have a picture here. Some of these ladies, Eloise Wood, Elsie Wood, and Callie Carson, Rosalie Ellis, and so this senior group met out at Hunter Park.
Yeah, that was. Honestly, they did a lot of work, and Woody Fight organized trips for them, and that was a very active group of people, and they were really funny people. Elsie was a school teacher, and she sort of led the group, and my mom, Carlula Bennett, was part of it, and Miss Fight, Bill Fight's mother. And they would call each other on the phone, and my mother, up in her late 70s and early 80s, she'd say, well, did Fight call you? Did Wood call you? Just like a bunch of teenagers.
Yeah.
But they were very, very active. They actually they had fundraising events, even at that stage in their life. They had plants and they quilted, and so they were still active.
Yeah. And this same senior group, they actually meet out at Hunter Park. Of course, they're meeting at Jesse Davis Park now. And last week they went up to the Apple Festival up in LJ. So they still take trips, and they still have a fundraiser. They had a yard sale a couple of weeks ago. So,
yeah.
So right. I guess.
What did they do with the money? Just to make trips this time?
They have a couple of donations that they give to people in the community. And of course, you spoke about the Garden Club, which we don't know if this is the Garden Club.
No, that's not Garden Club.
It's a group of ladies that got together out at the community house that we called it then.
I don't know what this is, and I was telling a friend of mine last night about it, and she says, well, they were cooking, and I said, well, they had on some frilly aprons. But I have an idea that had to do with the award that Douglasville won for the Better Community Award.
Beautification Award?
Yeah, and that was given by the Georgia Power Company and was a state award, and that's the only thing that I can think that these were some of the most active women in Douglasville at the time.
Right.
Women at that time, women my age, were busy raising children, and we just didn't have time to do as much.
Yeah. And what about day camps? You mentioned day camps that were held out there.
The day camps. Now we did that because it was our children that were attending.
Right.
And there was one lady I remember specifically that had about 5 children, and she was so good. She would come out there every day and work, and she had a tiny baby she brought out there, and I bet that baby ate 4 pounds of dirt during that week. But she was so good, and she kept things going even though she had that tiny baby with her.
Right.
You know, it just didn't bother her a bit. But the children loved it. They would come early in the morning and start with their swimming and dance, and the Sentinel would come out and take pictures. So it was good for the children there. I don't remember the boys being there. Now, I think this was for the girls. I don't remember any boys being involved with that.
Well, we still have day camps out at Hunter Park. This year we had them over at Jesse Davis.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that all of these programs that was started in the 1950s are still going today.
Yeah, correct. Well, those children that I'm talking about are grandmothers now.
Right.
Yeah.
They probably send their grandkids to day camp at Hunter Park.
Absolutely, probably do. Yeah, and have fond memories of it too.
All right, Dot, that gets us up to 1960, but we have so much information we're going to have to kind of make this a two-parter. So, do you mind joining us for our next segment?
I'd be happy to.
All right, so we look forward to seeing you on the next edition of The Lineup.